and finding uh, co-founders or mentors or whatever. So, but that's specific, like the expertise, knowledge. What other aspects are necessary for a thriving community? What else do you think are like, if you had the recipe, what's the ingredient list?
Right. Well, I would kind of stay in putting this still in the vein of community, but what a thriving entrepreneurship community means, and that broader ecosystem, I think is a soft landing place, and the ability to capitalize on learning. So and just an example, startups are inherently risky. When they blow up, oftentimes if you're in a thriving ecosystem or community, those that knowledge and learnings can be absorbed by other startups and brought onto teams. And in fact, it's actively sought out in a lot of ways. It's not necessarily losing. There's no such thing, as losing unless you stop. But you either win, you find your product market fit, business model fit, or you learn something. You'll learn something that didn't work, or learn something about a market that that you can better prepare for. If you don't have that ecosystem or community around you, and you kind of jet off on your own, and you're in an area where if you swing and you miss, you blow up, and you have no place to to go, you oftentimes have to go to a community where that that knowledge and experience will be valued.
Yeah, I think one thing that's really essential also is, and this is something that I don't think we have a lot of in El Paso, is willing to support people who seem low status. And, that's kind of ironic because El Paso is, I think, socially very flat from the perspective of there's not like a lot of like, I don't know, social stratification between different educated classes or income classes. But at least within the business community, I do think there's like a lot of social stratification between like successful business people and people who are just getting their start. And, every startup looks like trash when it starts. Every startup is super ugly. Their website's ugly, their logo is ugly, their product is ugly. And it's really important for people to understand that that is normal and that's fine. And every startup is born as an ugly baby, and at some point it grows up into some big, beautiful business. And so, I think one thing that's very important for communities is to support things when they're ugly, and to have a little bit of imagination about like what it could look like in the future, because things need time to grow. And I've seen a little bit of it personally, but I've kind of in like third party, as like an outside observer, seen it happen to other entrepreneurs where, they're at a pitch competition and they have like what's very clearly a bad idea. And the feedback that they get is like not friendly to them. And it's like very critical, and they just get like slapped down. The fire or the spark is smothered before it even has a chance to burn. And I think that's really bad. I think giving people ideas or giving people room to be terrible and grow, and kind of encouraging that is something that you see in other ecosystems where people have succeeded. So I think that's one critical element. Another critical element is just like openness of information. One of the things that I have seen is, locally, is this sort of like desire to own the ecosystem or to own the community. But the thing is that ecosystems and communities are like definitionally not something that can be owned. They're just disparate sets of people coming together. Y Combinator is a very exclusive program, and it's very hard to get into. But like if you meet people from Y Combinator, they're all incredibly helpful and super eager to support you. And it's exclusive to get into the program, but it's not exclusive to like connect with the people. And there's really no secrets about what goes on in there. And I think we're missing that to some degree here. is that level of openness to just, willingly share information and connections with people, and to, add to the community by adding more people to it.
Great. Just on a side note, everyone listening, feel free to put in the chat box any questions you have for Erik or JJ. We'll get to all of the questions. Anything you wanna mention, any comments also. So okay, sorry. Getting back, it's kind of curious that you mentioned, interesting that you mentioned, because Silicon Valley is really known for, mostly known, the culture, but because of two things: the trust and the culture of permission to fail, learning from failure. So how do you think we could incorporate more of that into the region, and not just El Paso, like El Paso, Juarez, New Mexico, that's considered like a complete ecosystem. You mentioned that you may have seen a bit of lacking, but like what steps could we take in the right direction?
Yeah, I think creating a safe place where failure is celebrated. So Brent Feld, from Techstars has a book, Startup Communities, which is really interesting, but kind of one of the concepts and takeaways, around that, what they did in Boulder was actually have failure parties, right? So when a startup was closing, they share lessons learned, they read the post-mortem, of what went wrong, but also it's a big party and celebration, onto what's next. And I think, a little bit, Erik was kind of mentioning it. It's that we tend to over-index to at least within the community at times to projects or people that have some level of success, already and credibility, versus, some of those out there wild, ideas. And, there is that sense too, where I think, and I think Reid Hoffman, said it, if you aren't embarrassed, by your first launch of your product, you ship too late, right? You want to get your ugly baby out there, have the world just tear into it, hurt its feelings, make it cry, but they learn from it. Yeah. So I think having a culture shift around embracing failure, and celebrating it, even sometimes in a symbolic nature, is you had a hypothesis and this is what came back. It didn't work, but we could learn from that. And then the other thing is adopting that courage, just to be okay with an incomplete and unfinished idea out there.
I would also say, one thing that's I've seen that's, not even, it ties to the failure and it ties to having an ugly baby. But I think one thing that's missing is a familiarity with success. So one of the weird issues that I've seen is that people don't totally know how to abstract out from tiny, ugly baby startup to awesome, huge, successful company. And so, and they don't know what the process is involved in getting there. And so I think you see a lot of like impatience when companies aren't, going, immediately going in that direction, or again, they don't understand that like being ugly is part of the process of becoming like big and successful. And so I think oftentimes, because there's not this understanding that like, success is this like long meandering path, we don't give people the opportunity to fail from the perspective of like not of like celebrating the failure, which is kind of its own thing, like JJ just mentioned, but also of embracing failure as part of the process and being patient with the failure, and understanding that even Facebook was like some hideous website, and it took 12 years for Facebook to go from or was it 8 years? I think it was 8 years for Facebook to go from inception to IPO, and they're like a phenomenal outlier, right? Most companies are taking significantly longer than that. So not just getting familiar with the failure, like JJ mentioned, but understanding the path to success, I think, is really critical as well.
Okay, we have a question in the comment in the chat. It says, how is this going to connect with people in El Paso, especially who can help and guide on developing the baby? And I would just like to plug that the MCA's Innovation Center does do a lot of help on developing those early stage startups, pre-seed and seed. But what do you guys think? What other organizations, or how can someone start connecting?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of places to plug in from a formal perspective. I mean, MCA, does great work. Pioneers 21 has, convenings, work around that. Sandbox Ventures, more co-work, than actually providing programming. But there are some, cool entrepreneurs that hang out around there. So there's these formal channels, but I think what we can do a better job as a community is more of the informal, channels. Having venues and spaces to kind of have, some of these conversations, and particularly now that the pandemic is somewhat easing, although we still got to be safe out there, and all of the different variants have to be concerned. But I think as we somewhat return back to more in-person events, there's a lot of value in just not even talking shop or business, but just getting together and having these informal conversations. And so I think that's one area that I think we can better push here as a region.
Okay.
I would echo something that JJ said, which is, kind of the comment that I made before, that communities aren't built top down. Finding there's not that many of us, to be honest, but like finding the other entrepreneurs and the other people that are working in whatever you're working in is incredibly important. So if you're in the food and beverage industry, finding the other people that are in the food and beverage industry. If you're working in tech, finding the other people that are working in tech, and just connecting with them. It's like central places to me are great for particular things, but when I need advice on something, the first people that I'm calling up are people that I've just become friends with, and I think that's really what a community is.
Okay. Now, you mentioned previously, Erik, about getting to know I'm gonna rephrase it a bit, getting to know like the whole process, like from the ugly baby to the successful story. One of the key insights I liked about the entrepreneurship ecosystem is that you had access not just to the up and coming entrepreneurs, the ones that had just the idea. You also had access to the successful ones, to talk with good businessmen, that serial entrepreneurs and people that already have that success, and not just mentor, just like connect and understand their success and understanding the general process. That's something that really kind of expands on what you were saying. So how do you see that playing out here in El Paso? Like you already mentioned accepting the ugly babies, but also like accessing the successful businessmen. How do you see that becoming?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have, I think one of the worst things for our ecosystem and our community is that we don't have one of those success stories. And I think that's what makes some of these things that I mentioned difficult. So if I was getting started and was looking for these sorts of role models, I would very aggressively look to people outside of El Paso, maybe people who are from El Paso building in other places, or just connecting to people in the industry that I'm in, to try to find those models and those mentors, and working as hard as possible to succeed here, so that way we do have the local model and the local mentor. But there's people who are successful business people, like in whatever construction or real estate or finance or whatever industries that we have here in town, and I've met a bunch of them, and they're very nice people. But I think it's if you don't understand the process specifically of like the specific industry, like it's all just kind of like generalized advice. So having those people who've like gone through what you've gone through and succeeded in some way, I think is incredibly important. And again, unfortunately, we just don't have it here. But the great thing about COVID, for all of the terrible things that it wrought upon society, is that it made it a lot easier to connect with people online. It's not unusual or weird to reach out to somebody and say, hey, are you interested in having a Zoom call with me? Before you would have had to have like flown to whatever city they were in and met up with them for coffee near their office. But now people are down to just like meet over phone call. So taking advantage of that, I think is something that everybody can do. And you can take those learnings and share them with your friends here.
Okay. JJ, do you have anything else to add?
I mean, not particularly. I mean, it's technology really lowers that ability to connect with experts and individuals and kind of beyond the local and immediate community. There are online communities that help support either knowledge transfer or just inform approaches of the way you build or scale your company. Nothing too much to add there.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the social norms have evolved more dramatically than the technology in the past year. Like the technology was already there, but as Gamma is commenting here, it was more of like people's willingness to use the technology.
Yeah, it's a whole different dynamic now, and people are adapting. So you are both working on some form of community engagement, either Erik with the MCA or JJ with Microsoft. So how would you describe your particular contribution to the community?
I mean, it's kind of an interesting community approach. So one thing that I have the benefit of having is a name like Microsoft on my business card, and because we're able to fund binationally and even across state lines, what's great is oftentimes I have the ability to convene partners that normally couldn't come together. So a big example is we have state and federal dollars that often can't Texas dollars can't cross into New Mexico, and U.S. dollars oftentimes can't go into Juarez itself. Being a global company, we're able to help stitch some of those projects that normally wouldn't get funded or pieced together because of just funding restrictions come into the place. The other area that just from a community engagement perspective and kind of been a focus for my approach with TechSpark is how to make the motion activities that often am kicking off or assembling with Microsoft through either seed funding or just the ability to convene partners, having them be owned ultimately by the community. So an example of this, our region, we didn't have a computer science teachers association here. Was able to help spearhead and assemble that, but now you build a community of practice among educators. So they're learning best practice and tips from each other, able to tap into professional development opportunities, and then couple it, and bring in national partners and projects that work. So we have TEALS, which is technology, education, literacy in schools. Now, as we expand our TEALS footprint, which brings industry professionals to teach computer science in the classroom, those new computer science teachers can now get plugged into, the CSTA. They get access to, curriculum either, from TEALS or partners like code.org. If they continue to pursue, certification, now they can plug into UTEP and go into the Microsoft Computer Science Education Academy to get upper division, credits, and now teach dual credit or community college level computer science instruction. So taking this approach where, was able to help assemble, these components, and then, drive ownership of, from actual computer science teachers, from administrators, and getting UTEP's, buy-in to help support that effort is a big key. And we're doing some of this work too around the binational technology councils. So currently it's umbrellaed under the Borderplex Alliance, and there's quite a bit of work. One big committee is kind of how technology is disrupting, our lives, what it means for us, on the border, and our economies that have traditionally been built on low-wage labor. But those low-wage labor jobs and tasks are some of the most at risk of automation. How do we as a region grapple and position ourselves, so that, the inevitable disruption or dislocation that we have, we're able to mitigate maybe some of the downsides to that, but then able to also position ourselves in a global economy as a really competitive region, to bring more opportunity for to the region. But again, this is work where oftentimes just being able to use that that banner Microsoft, convene the partners, and then help equip and empower the community to own these motions, I think is key to making sure that this work doesn't stop when a corporate program that ultimately all corporate programs have a shelf life. Hopefully it's a really long shelf life, but still would be able to sustain past this opportunity.
My contributions are nowhere near as robust. I just see myself as one of the nodes in the network. And I think that's something, again, like talking about communities is really being organic and driven from the bottom up. I think every node has value, every connection has value. And, if you feel like you want to be a part of the tech ecosystem and the tech community here, all you really have to do is like show up and bring whatever you have that it is to the table. And so, for me, it's connections to people outside of El Paso. I try to bring in friends from San Francisco and New York to show them like what's going on here, to connect them to some of the people in town, to show off our, region and our amazing food and culture. Part of it is just bringing the knowledge that I have. The reason that I teach that class at UTEP is because I feel like I know some stuff that is valuable for students and I want to share that knowledge with them. But there's not really anything dramatically special about what I'm doing other than just like sharing what I have. And I think that's the culture that I appreciated being in the Bay Area. And I think it's something that everyone can contribute to a region as well.
Okay. Now, what I've noticed between you two is that you have kind of like not opposite, but complementary points of view about the community, where as you, Eric, you said, okay, from bottom up, that you build a community from bottom up and everyone starts interacting and exchanging relationships and expertise, as opposed to what JJ was mentioning, that building the community from the top down and then delegating it to that community for them to keep on running. So those are, as to my understanding, a bit of different points of view. Do you have any comments, like specifically about the other side, like Erik? What is your experience with organizations trying to establish communities? And JJ, what is your experience with communities that are already existent and that are trying to get access to resources and structure and organization?
I just need to disagree with JJ on absolutely everything. That's why we have diametrically opposed views. Whatever position he has, I just take the opposite. Our friendship is based on tension. No, I mean, so you know, being the EIR at the MCA, having worked at Startups, I do think there's a role for organizations to like bring people together and organize them. But you know, just because you have a building and a program and staff, like a community isn't going to spontaneously combust from that. I mean, you have to do a lot of work to bring the people together, and you can probably set a lot of things in motion. But I think without the individual people that come together to make up that group, it's really hard to like have anything. You can't. I think you can kind of like coordinate people and bring them together, but like, you know, unless you're, I don't know, going out of town and like bringing people in, you're not going to populate those communities yourself. And again, as I mean, even JJ mentioned, I think even with resources as vast as Microsoft's, the ultimate goal is to have something that's self-sustaining and that ultimately is driven from the bottom up, even if you need a little bit of like top-down coordination to begin with. So I think sometimes it's, you know, these organizations are great for getting things started and kind of kicking off the process. And oftentimes they're just a formalization of something that already exists. Startups didn't need to build a Stanford founder community because it already existed. They just formalized a lot of what was going on and gave people a venue to connect at.
Okay. JJ?
Yeah, no, I mean, Erik kind of hit the nail on the head. We're diabolically opposed to each other, and can't agree
on anything.
On anything ever. No, but it's not mutually exclusive. And we actually do a lot of, you know, grassroots support in terms of helping build community. The thing is that you need work from the top, you know, from the bottom and sideways, you know, of continue to expand, you know, personal networks on that. I think the important things, you know, even from a grassroots perspective, is understanding what resources are out there. What are, you know, the places where you can plug in and, you know, best make your contribution or even you know, connect with. And so it does take both. I mean, just as an individual, if you're wanting to learn about a pre-seed stage, I mean, at MCA, it's probably great. You know, the best place to start, you know, here in town. If you're an established, you know, automotive supplier, you know, something like the Bridge is a good place to plug in, because that's where that community has really been built around, is on this, you know, this maquiladora, you know, system. So having those institutions are in place is really important, but making sure that the bottom and you know, down to the individual node understands what resources are available is also, you know, super key. And once you have those nodes, you know, kind of plug in, and there's this overlap between, you know, all of the you know, the programs as well, you kind of get a natural ad hoc, you know, community that goes, you know, that evolves on its own without a lot of you know, personal direction or you know, centralized, you know, control, because you can't own a community. You could help facilitate and support a community, but at a certain point, the community will ultimately decide what direction it it should take.
Okay. And again, talking about the specific region, borderplex community, how do you see that? What trends do you see happening for the next 5 years? Where do you think that community is heading, and or what is the vision that it has, and what are the steps to get there?
I mean, there's a couple like really big, trends that all kind of consolidated this past year. One USMCA agreement kicked off July 1st, 2020. And so that creates a lot of incentives, for companies to, just source more of their supply chain, from North America. And then with COVID, kicking off, we saw how fragile supply chains were. And the strategy, companies and were often taking were a single source, but super efficient and low cost. And that typically meant, East Asia as your product sourcing. But there's, also trade tensions between the United States, China. There's, this shift where when, with a fragile, ecosystem, if your products get stuck in cotton ports, you want to continue to do business. So a lot of companies have shifted from that efficient supply chain to a resilient supply chain model, which is bringing opportunities back to North America. I mean, and especially Mexico from a manufacturing standpoint. But I think it's going to look really, really different. So they're in order to remain cost competitive, I think you're going to see a rise in automation, and even beyond automation, you'll see more autonomous plants and factories. So that will really shift the type of profile or worker working within these spaces. So from a workforce development perspective, how do we effectively move our front line into higher orders of thinking, or engaging, and working within an autonomous plant, right? So there's a lot of opportunity there. You have these trends where sensors continue to fall, in their cost, and cloud computing and 5G networks allow supercomputing to be available really anywhere. And so coupled with sensors and this IoT application, now the way we conduct business, conduct trade, all of that becomes a lot more accessible to smaller, medium enterprises, which typically have more agility to take advantage and disrupt markets. So given where we're at, in this this borderplex area, we're also at the center of like immigration, security and trade, goods and people moving across the border, and as blockchain technologies continue to mature, what does that mean in terms of engaging or managing trade, a distributed ledger, with blockchain, and more autonomous ERPs. So I think we're going to be at the center of a lot of really important, global and technology discussions. And there are companies in the ecosystem actively trying to address, some of those opportunities, which is super exciting.
Great.
I see a couple of trends that are going to shape the region and change the face of the networks here. One is that Silicon Valley as a geography is dying. Before, Silicon Valley was like the 41-mile stretch between San Jose and San Francisco, and due to rising housing prices and like really poor local governance, people are leaving the region in droves. And COVID kind of accelerated that because you were stuck in your apartment or your office or whatever, and so it didn't matter whether you were actually in the Bay Area or not, you could still get your business done. And so, you kind of had this like combination of all these three things getting people to like leave the region. So they're not migrating to El Paso. They're going to, Austin or New York or Miami. If we had a better social media presence in the city, though, maybe they would be moving here. The mayor of Miami essentially Twittered Miami into like a tech hub, which is an incredible feat. If you guys aren't familiar with the work that he did there, search, see what you can find on Mayor Francis Suarez of Miami. It's insane. But what that is doing, even though people aren't moving here, is that it's changed the opportunity for people that aren't in the Bay Area. Before, if you wanted to start a software company or a tech company, you like almost had to move to San Francisco or Palo Alto or somewhere in between. Now you can stay in El Paso. Like you can stay here, you can stay in Austin, you can stay wherever you're from, and you can connect to investors, you can connect to people with more expertise than you to learn from them. And there's like a viable path to fund it. When I started Pantheon and I started pitching investors in like 2019, the response I got sometimes was like, cool, let me know when you move back to the Bay Area. Now nobody cares. So it's a great time. That is weird. He has some great musical tastes. Can you mute that, whoever that is?
Yeah.
I can. So I think that's a great opportunity for people that are here in the region is that you don't have to move anymore and you can build here. And all of those networks are freely available to you. Another thing is that if the city positions itself properly, if you're building a company and you position the city properly, this is actually a very great place to live. I mentioned real estate prices. The country is insane. Like buying housing in Austin, Miami, anywhere in California, anywhere on the East Coast is ridiculous. So I do think there's a sort of like quality of life type thing that people here could be pushing, which is you can live in a major metro area, you can afford a house, your cost of living is a fraction of what it is in other places. This is actually a really fantastic place to like build a family. And unfortunately for the tech industry, it's not really a great place to build a career. But if we have any companies that are able to get funding and get that traction and get that growth, it could be a really great place for people to grow a family and a career. So I think the first one is more of like a big macro issue. The second one is like a kind of microeconomic issue. Somebody has to like win here in order to make that happen for themselves and for their employees.
Great. So if I understood it correctly, you're talking about attracting talent and attracting expertise, while JJ is talking about the future opportunities of technology and how the future opportunities will develop more startups and more potential if the workforce is trained, if everyone decides to stay in the region and create businesses for the manufacturing and Juarez and the whole community. And what you're saying is attracting talent. It's a great option post-COVID world. And yeah, I can see how those two trends would weave together and shape the next couple of years. So we're right now just about to hit the 1 hour, the 5 p.m. So just to close it off, I would like to thank you all for assisting. And thank you, JJ and Erik, for this great talk. Great to have you here. And just to have everyone know that the next Tech Tuesday, the next month, is going to be about fueling innovation through research, through scientific research. So that's also going to be very interesting. And thank you, everyone. That would be all. And feel free to stay on and chat with us and open your mics and have a quick conversation while we sign off. So thank you, JJ and Erik.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Alberto.